many of you can distinctly remember the exact feeling of stepping foot in your home after a long semester, or the feeling of eating home-cooked food after a long trip? The smells, the sights, the sounds of your home hit you right away and wrap you up like a cozy blanket. This sense of familiarity and comfort comes from having a space that is truly your own, designed to your liking and specificities. A place that holds years of memories and a place where you can be no one but your true self. I, like many of you sitting here today, am lucky enough to have a place to feel this sense of safety and permanency. I found my first home in Kerala, where I grew up for the first 18 years of my life. After that, for the last 5 years, I found home in a hostel room while at college, like I'm sure many of you here are doing today. However, I knew from a very young age that having a home was a luxury and a privilege and not something I could take for granted. This became even more evident every single monsoon season. Some days, when the rains were particularly bad and school would be cancelled, I would be at home, and the evening news would show local reports of flooding and landslides across my state. Also in the morning newspaper would be a statistic of the number of people who had been forced to flee their homes due to these floods and landslides. Some years were better, some years were worse, but almost inevitably, at least a few families would be forced out of their homes. So I knew that this kind of forcible displacement existed, but it wasn't really until 2018 that I realized just how bad it got for the families that lost their lives and who had to be forced out of their homes. 2018, the state witnessed the worst floods it had seen in more than a century. Suddenly, the problem seemed a lot closer to home, and people I knew very closely were impacted. In some areas, the floods washed away complete homes, and people had to flee in makeshift boats, or some people had to be evacuated in helicopters, clutching whatever belongings they could carry. The floods worsened existing vulnerabilities because the people who were already the most vulnerable had nowhere to go when the floods hit them and they were forcibly displaced. In this sense, the floods worsened existing societal prejudices and financial insecurities. Some families had relatives that were still reported missing. Some others had relatives that were lost in the floods, and some others had to come to terms with the fact that their entire life savings were lost in a matter of hours. During this extremely vulnerable and traumatic period, these families were forced to live in makeshift shelter setups, which were essentially 4 pieces of bamboo and a piece of tarpaulin. As you can imagine, this offered no real privacy and no real safety for them to even process the trauma that had been inflicted on them. Fast forward a few years to when I was in my 3rd year studying engineering at IIT Kharagpur, I met 2 seniors, Kaushal and Madhav, who had witnessed similar instances of forcible displacement due to extremes of weather in different parts of the country. Kaushal was an architecture graduate, and so he had ideated an easy to assemble and easy to transport modular home, and they were looking for ways to grow and scale a charity that would use this technology to house vulnerable, forcibly displaced families around the world. I decided to join this charity as the chief of staff and to lead partnerships because my mind immediately went to the people of my state and what had happened to them in 2018. And so I simply knew I had to get involved. The name of this charity is Nostos Homes. Remember that feeling of homecoming I talked to you about earlier? Ancient Greek poets had a word for this complex emotion. When they told tales of heroes returning home after a long and tiring journey, they expressed this emotion and they termed it Nostos. Our goal with this charity was and continues to be extremely simple. It is to recreate this feeling and this overwhelming emotion of homecoming for these forcibly displaced families by giving them a strong and safe and secure home. One such family is that of Ethel Chamba. Ethel is a single mother of 3 young children. We came across her story when we were working with the families of Malawi in Africa. She relied entirely on temporary jobs in small-scale farming, and she was recently navigating what life looked like as a single mother post her divorce when Cyclone Gombe hit her village, completely devastating her home virtually overnight. Now, Ethel was already under the poverty line, which meant that she had no financial means to rebuild her home. She and her 3 young children had to move away to her grandmother's house. Moving away meant that the family lost their only income source. It meant that the youngest child, who was HIV positive, could not get her medical treatment she needed. It also meant that the 2 older kids, Laxton and Rebecca, had to be pulled out of school. This is what is important to understand about forcible displacement. It affects all aspects of their life and doesn't just end with the loss of a roof over their head. It compounds multiple fundamental challenges like lack of access to quality healthcare and financial insecurity. What that also means is that the quicker we can give homes to these families post a disaster, the lesser of these negative ripple effects they will have to endure. The transformation was remarkable when Ethel was housed in a brand new home. It was like a weight had lifted off her shoulders. She was able to go back to her job, her kid was able to get the treatment she needed, and the 2 older kids were able to go back to school. In this way, we were able to stop the domino effect and of severe negative impacts and really restore her life to how it was. Now, most of you here today are also in your early 20s, and you're probably still in college, and you might also be wondering how you can create impact too for a cause that you are personally passionate about. I believe the first step is to identify exactly what this cause is for you. Ask yourself, what is something you've always wanted to change? The changes you want to make or the fixes you think you're comfortable doing needn't be large. It can be small. It is always okay to start small, but what is important is to get into the habit of doing when you notice something that needs to change. It is never too early to drive change for a cause you are personally passionate about. There might be voices in your head telling you that you don't have all the skills and all the expertise needed to deliver the solution. This had happened to me as well. In my early days of social impact, I often had similar doubts myself. I was an engineering graduate, and obviously running a charity requires a lot more than just that. The entire team were either current college students like myself then or recent engineering graduates. So I had a doubt and I had concerns that, for instance, I didn't have expertise in domains like legal in order to be able to pull off something like creating impact. However, I decided to take the leap despite these concerns and despite these doubts, and I instead chose to focus on cultivating confidence in the capabilities that I did have. I focused on what I knew I could provide with the skill sets I did have and on what I knew I could pick up on the go. This allowed us to focus on the areas we were good at, and instead of hiring to cover all stages of the delivery pipeline, we built critical partnerships to scale internationally and nationally. If you all decide to build solutions for a cause you're personally passionate about, you might also encounter a situation in which the people you're talking to for partnerships are people who are significantly older and are significantly more well experienced than you are. This was similar to my journey when I started off building homes for the forcibly displaced. In many of the meetings that we were looking at for potential partnerships, I would be the youngest one in the room, and the people who I was talking to would be people who had started leading these organizations even before I was born. That is the kind of difference in experience we're talking about. One of my main responsibilities was to build credibility for our team, for a very young team, and for a very young organization. To be taken seriously, we took exceptional care in sweating the small stuff. We made sure we preempt potential questions. We made sure we would think through all potential scenarios, even before an initial pitch and even before a negotiation or a closing of a deal. This mentality of always sweating the little stuff can help you all also do 2 things. A, it can help you build credibility for a young team if you decide to enter social impact. And B, it can also help you calm the imposter syndrome within you that might be there. This was something that I experienced when I started off in my journey. I would tell myself, and I would sort of doubt myself, saying that I did not necessarily deserve a seat at the table simply because of my age. But knowing that I'd put in the effort and knowing that I'd put in the time and energy allowed me to tell myself that I did deserve a seat at the table simply because of the energy and time I had spent preempting all possible scenarios and working through all possible situations. You can all do this too. You can use your youth to your advantage. You can combine the enthusiasm and the excitement and the drive you feel right now while you're young with expertise and professionalism beyond your years. Leading change by providing homes has been an incredible journey for me. It's a journey that I'm extremely grateful for. It has allowed me to access tremendous professional and personal growth in a very accelerated time frame. But most importantly, it has allowed me to foster meaningful connections with families around the world. It has given me the privilege to witness our homes transform the lives of families in India and Africa. Taking the leap has allowed me to help in building and providing 500,000 nights of housing for forcibly displaced families. These are 500,000 nights that these families would have otherwise had to spend in makeshift shelter setups in a state of crippling anxiety about their well-being and safety. Around the world, 86.5 million people are forcibly displaced. 149 million children are currently malnourished. 1.6 million people die from tuberculosis annually, even though medicines have been created simply because they cannot access those medicines. The trajectory of their lives can be transformed if you take the leap. If I hadn't taken the leap, Ethel Chamba and her 3 young children in Malawi might not have had a home they deserve. If I had not taken a leap, Shraddha, a mother of a 7-year-old child in Karnataka who lost her homes due to floods, might not have had a home they deserve. Millions of vulnerable people around the world are waiting for you to take the leap. Thank you.